Greetings and salutations, Interdescents. This is Wolfphototech, and here we are going to go with a little review of the current starter set for Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition. This is the original starter set for Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition. It is important to note that the rating or score for this Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition starter sets will be tied specifically to Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition starter sets. Because when I compare them to other company starter sets like Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, Call of Cthulhu, Pathfinder, Starfinder, there's going to be a really big differentiation in score just because of Wizards of the Coast and how they build their starter sets and other things, okay? But anyways, let's start into the starter set for Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition. The original one. As there's going to be a new one called Starter Set They use the term Starter Set Reborn, which also includes Dragons of Shipwreck Isle, and that should be out in June or July, or so. No, August. It should be out in August if I remember correctly. That was recently announced. It's in the D&D Direct, which is a somewhat knockoff of Nintendo Directs, but was just a big ad. This is the cover. I took it off already. Some simple artwork and title on the edge. Really simple. Nothing special in the top. Okay, so the lid is like basic as it can be. You get the absolute minimum number of dice to play Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition. And I mean like absolute minimum. Like if you remove one die from the set, you have less than the absolute minimum. And you definitely will need more dice than what's in this starter set because they don't even give you enough D6s to roll ability stats, which is not included in the starter set rules here. There's no character creation rules in this set. They basically just tell you how to play the game. So what you get is a D4, a D6, a D8, a D10, no D10s, no percentage, just a D10, a D12, and a D20. That's it for your dice. Okay? Like, I mean, it's the absolute minimum. You're definitely wanting to buy more dice, but that is like the minimum. If you like throw a fireball, you're going to have to be re-rolling the same die many times. This is the starter rules. This is actually a really good bookie wookie. Stand that up over there, right next to my map pack. This is actually a pretty good starter book. If you've never, it's telling you already that it's flimsy. But anyways, this is actually really good value right here, as this book is actually the most well-organized, one of the most well-organized books for teaching how to play Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition there is. It immediately goes into getting started, explains the dice, gives you a quick example and explanation of Dungeons & Dragons. It gives you a basic structure of play, explains the ability scores and the core rules, advantage and disadvantage, ability checks, proficiency bonus, contests, skills. It goes into the various skills, strength checks, all the different strength checks, which is just one, dexterity checks, constitution checks, intelligence checks, wisdom checks, charisma checks, saving throws. It tells you a little bit about hidden and vision, which ties into your wisdom and dexterity, so it makes sense why it's in this somewhere midway between the two. Find and hidden object, little section. It gives you the structure of combat, the order, how to organize it, turns, initiative, reactions, all your options for movement and attack, or your general actions. And it explains quickly rolling a 1 or 20, searches, using an object, making an attack, unseen attackers and targets, ranged attacks, melee attacks, opportunity attacks, 2 weapon fighting, cover, damage and healing, damage resistance and vulnerability, some more on healing, dropping to 0 hit points. It actually is really well organized. All the very important words are highlighted, like vulnerability, resistance, damage at 0 hit points, knocking out a character. Then you got basically a basic section. You got the combat pillar that's covered up here, and then you have travel and adventuring section right here, and rewards tied into that. So it explains the basic framework of how you deal with that stuff. Buying equipment, weapons, armor, coins, adventuring gear, basic set, descriptions of different types of adventuring gear, like lantern, hooded, oil, potion of healing, rations, spellbook, thieves' tools, tinderbox, torch. And then it goes into a little section on spellcasting. This is actually well organized. However, it is very bare bones and is lacking visual images with denotations as to how you orient in spells with different zones of action, like cubes, rays, cones, etc. That stuff is in the player's handbook. You have longer casting times, range, components, verbal, somatic, material. It explains all the basic stuff. Instantaneous concentration, what you do when you take damage while you're concentrating. It does describe cone, cube, line, sphere, etc. in here, but it's just a really short little description. Just a tiny little tiny little description of it, which is not up to snuff. The player's handbook actually has a nice section further back. By the way, if you ever see someone pull out a player's handbook or dungeon master's guide and they don't have papers in it, they're sus. Seriously, there is no such thing as a player or a dungeon master that doesn't have some sheets stuck in their books. In here in this book, there's actually a nice little diagram right here of all the different forms and the little star point that's set on them, if you can see, is the point of origin. Okay? So this book basically, it does a good job of describing most things, but it does it with as few words as possible. You have a nice little section on spells. It has a good variety from the core rulebook for level spell level 1, 2, and 3 for your wizards and your clerics, but it is not it's not comprehensive. So you're not going to get everything in there. You're just going to get just enough to cover the first 5 levels of character adventuring of the limited class selection, which is basically just going to be, I'm going to cover that when I get to the sheets. You got a nice little book that is approximately 64 pages long, which is literally the size of each Spelljammer book. So this book is as thick as many pages as each individual book for the Spelljammer set. A part of me says, is Wizards of the Coast rushed Spelljammer out like that, just because something is coming over the horizon, and they had to cover the space route for the 5e system. So here is Lost Mines of Phandelver. This is the book for the DM. The other book is for both players and DMs, the starter rules. So as a DM, you want to read this book first, through as much as possible, and then hand it to your new players to read through it. It's actually a pretty good book for beginners. This book goes over backgrounds, overview of the adventure, abbreviations for different concepts of terms like DC equals DC equals difficulty class, GP stands for gold pieces, SP stands for silver pieces, CP stands for copper pieces, XP is experience. You got a little map of the area. You get the starting out point. I'm not going to show much more. In the back end of the section of this book, you have some magic items in the adventure that your players can find and use. You got basic stats for monsters. This section explains how to read the stats and how to use the monsters. And there's a section right here of various monsters that I'm not going to show off extensively because they would ruin the experience for players. With a little list of the rules index on the back side, as well as the adventure playtesters on the bottom. And that's actually pretty good. My only issue is, much like 5th edition modules and adventures, they have a tendency in this book to give you more stuff, information, and story stuff, or yippity yappity chappity, than is necessary for running the adventure. Like, going back to the Goblin Arrows section here, as a DM, the only thing that is really relevant is this big of text on those 2 pages. There's like, you need this important information is about this much, and then there's a chunk of important information on the other page that's about this much, with another chunk of important information about this much. So you're getting like this much extra text when it's like, I really don't care. I really don't need that information. It's just excessively like over-explaining setups to things, and I really don't need it. I just need to know like how many goblins are there, how many what their basic equipment loadout is, if they have traps or pits in the area, which they do denote in here. So they really overcram stuff like that, and it's just tiring to actually read. Onto the character sheets. These character sheets are pre-made out for level 1 characters. You have the stats already on there and your proficiencies. Naturally, most players will want to make their own characters. And on the back side, there's instructions on abilities, like what is a human, how does it relate, fighters, background information, and how to level up your character and what abilities they gain as they level up. So that I'm not going to show you every single one, but there's 2 fighters in here, a rogue, specifically it's just standard rogue. At level 3, you'll get your subclass. Which they use thief. So you got a thief rogue. Then you have cleric, a dwarf cleric, a high elf wizard. So you have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 character sheets that come with this. 2 fighters, a cleric, a rogue, and a wizard. The fighters are a champion. They're both champions. I have to double check that. So you get 2 champion fighters. And then in the box, you can see it's white. But that's actually a filler panel that fills the bottom of the box. Give you an idea how much it fills. That is nice to have that. People are mixed about having boxes that are thicker than they are needed to be. And you can see with Call of Cthulhu 7th edition box, that's substantially thinner. You got Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, which is thinner. You got a whole bunch of other gaming systems. You got other ones like Starfinder. Ooh. That's Hefty Boy. That are thicker. My Nintendo Wii U collection you just saw. Very bland bottom. A little section on the back of the cover of what you get in there. With a little description. Okay. And you'll understand when I show you the Starfinder box why it's such a hefty boy. But anyways, that little gap in the bottom is handy dandy for if you want to put your tactical maps in it, or if you have the player's handbook. Oops, the player's handbook that you can also put that in the box, bottom of the box as well. And you would have enough room to put everything else on top and still have room for everything else. You could also put a monster manual in. You could either put a player's handbook in there, a monster manual in there, or a game master's guide in there. But there is not enough room for all 3 or 2 of the books. So, as I said before, this is about as thick as the rule books for Spelljammer for 5th edition that's coming out. To give you an idea of how much you're getting in the future. Your slipcase. Slip that out. It always gets me whenever I see a YouTuber pull up their book and there's no paper in it. I have never known a player that has played more than 1 or 2 campaigns that does not have piles of paper in their book. Most players will eventually get to the point where they'll have enough little sheets in their book that it actually starts to break the spine. Which is why when you get really old books like this, for Dungeons & Dragons Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition, you'll see that the cover is snapped up like that because at some point, if you look in there, you see the gapping. That's from people cramming sheets into their book. By the way, to upgrade your Dungeons and Dragons experience, awesome books to pick up are old advanced Dungeons and Dragons books. You get all kinds of stuff. In fact, after the DMG for 5th edition, you should pick those books up. And those books are actually better than the modern books. The modern books waste a lot of your time with theory crafting and fluffy things, when in fact those books right there are like this is the speed of a barge. This is the conditions in which it can travel in at given speeds. If you're in a wilderness, these are charts for various types of campaigns or adventures and environments, and the types of creatures you may experience in those environments, which is also in the DMG, but it's much more limited. So on to the final section of this. I'm going to throw everything back in, even though I'm going to take the dice back out and pull my Traveler 5 box set out to stand this up. Okay, on to the score section. The score section for this, based on Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition versus all the others, is that this is like a 4-star. This is 4 stars right here. The starter rules here for new players and DMs is amazing. Read. I'm not joking. It's really useful for getting through the rules very quickly in a very concise manner without excessive amounts of fluff. The adventure still has a lot of fluff in it as far as words are concerned, so it's going to take you longer than it should to go through it to write it out. Older books, older adventure modules, and OSR style adventure modules are usually more to the point and only give you the important information with some extra bits around the edge to help expand you out, or a little extra information for like houses and stuff like that in it. Where this book is just, it's a little too much. The adventure module is just, which is kind of standard problem with Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, is that this book right here, if it was translated into, it was written in the style of older editions, it would only about be that thick. Yet again, I swear Wizards of the Coast pays their writers by the word. Or that they're failed novelists and they really want to write an entire story between interactions. But anyways, this is like a 4 literally because of the starter rules and that the starter rules page. Not the page, the book. That is an awesome book. It's a good adventure, so it's the primary contributor to the 4-star is the fact that it's a Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition starter set. The starter rules booklet is really good, but very minimal. It just gives you good enough quality, and it's concise enough and quickly moves through the details that you can literally teach your players, your new players and your new DMs, how to run the adventure or the system. And then the starter adventure is still on the fluffy side, but it's actually very well made. It's just they use more words than necessary. They ramble like I do. Okay? So it's a 4. Compared to other starter sets, this is falling into a hole. This is falling into a hole in stars. And it's going to be, I'm not going to give you a star rating compared to other systems because it's actually really terrible. Like you lose like 90% of your score when you compare it to other systems. So I'm not going to do that. Because for just like $5 or $10 more, other starter sets for other gaming systems give you like 5 times the value. The Call of Cthulhu set, which is basically the same price as this starter set, completely carpet nukes Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition starter sets. I mean, every single one of them, out of the water, effortlessly. The quality of the Call of Cthulhu starter set makes everything that Wizards of the Coast has made for starter sets for 5th edition look like garbage. They're garbage. The only thing that's really good, that's anywhere near Call of Cthulhu or even the other starter sets quality, is the starter rules book. This is just... there's hardly anything in the box compared to everything else. For the price as well. So, it's a really good starter set for 5th edition. It's right behind in the Essentials kit, which is my next one. But compared to everything else, it's not even competing. I put my Traveler or slipcase upside down. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and consider subscribing, and tell me so in the comments what you like the most about my videos, or hate the most about my videos. And see you next time.